Welcome all. My name is Dr. Himanshu Upadhyay and I teach in MA Development Program here in School of Development. Um, and again, when I stand here to introduce T. Setumadhavan, it reminds me why colloquiums are important. Because it was in the old PES campus at one of the colloquium that I met Setumadhavan sir when Dr. B.P. Mathur was talking to us about the importance of public audit and financial accountability. Some of you who are students of Master of Public Policy and Governance, some of you who are students of law would know the contribution made by Dr. B.P. Mathur, who is also a former deputy CAG, and has written several books on the institution and the robust work that the institution has done over the years. Again, as we speak about public auditing on 26th November, just about 10 days back, India and the Indian office, Indian Accounts and Audit Department, had an event called First Audit Divas, like dedicating a day in a year to the task of financial accountability and public auditing. So some of you would have seen those news clips and the way media has reported on that event, and would probably wonder what to make of those speeches by dignitaries. Leaving it at that, let me invite Setumadhavan sir, who has been part of Indian Accounts and Auditing Services from the 1966 cadre. He has worked in different capacities, the foremost important being that he was also an external auditor to United Nations in New York and has spent time looking at United Nations work across the countries and auditing it. So today he is going to speak to us about India's Constitutional Audit Office. We also call this Constitutional Audit Office sometimes Supreme Audit Institutions across democracies. And the way Constitution defines the roles and the tasks laid before the public auditors in India. And we will listen from him, not just the constitutional framework, but also the history of institution in post-independence years, how it has evolved, different audit genres that are there in front of us now, not merely the compliance audit and financial audit, but also performance audits. So over to you, Setumadhavan sir. Thanks. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Himanshu, for inviting me over here to speak about the public auditing and financial accountability. Actually, I was a little apprehensive when, while coming to talk to you about it for different reasons. One was, of course, auditing or accounting is not a very exciting profession that way to many. Bean counting or sort of nitpicking or fault finding, that sort of thing. You know, the profession grows on you. As you grow up in a profession, your profession also grows on you. You get the attributes of the profession. Auditors look at everything with a little suspicious mind. So how interesting would it be for a young generation like you? That is one of the things. Second thing, of course, afternoon, normally, the afternoon sessions are those, people, not as energetic as normally is in the morning. Little snoozing is allowed, so that is. But the most important thing which worried me was, you must have seen, or you must be seeing in the newspapers every day now, the ACB, the Anti-Corruption Bureau, they have gone to raid different houses, offices of people, the employees, the government employees, and they found that so much of money has been accumulated by many government servants, in Karnataka particularly. And the funniest thing was that when they went to a house and cut open a drainage pipe, money was just flowing. Some of you must have seen it in the social media. Now, when there is so much of corruption all around, What am I talking about? Financial, accountability. This is a question which arises in the minds of everybody. Sometime back, about a week or 2 weeks ago, we read a news item that the Contractors Association of Karnataka, of Bangalore, they submitted a memorandum to the government complaining that 30% of the contract value which they get, they are required to hand over to the politicians. They also said 6 to 7% they give to the officials for passing the bills. Assuming that there is a 15-20% profit element in every contract, virtually 50% of the contracts which are awarded, and believe me, it is in tens of thousands that the contracts are awarded now, even the city. Now recently the Chief Minister said 900 crores they are going to invest in drainage system, on which the stormwater drainage system, which is causing floods, and I'll talk about it to you later. Now, sometime back, the Prime Minister at that time, Prime Minister Modi, I believe, came for an election address when the Congress was in power. And then he called the ruling government of Karnataka a 10% government. After some time, the government changed and another government came. And then the same the ruling party became opposition, and they said this is a 20% government. And now contractors are saying that it's a 30% government. So where do we go? It's very evident. You drive from city to the campus, the road condition, the roads in the city, if you drive around, there is everywhere potholes. A judge in Kerala yesterday, while disposing of a public interest litigation, he told the government council, what are the engineers for? If they cannot have a single road without potholes, why don't they resign and get away with it and give the job to somebody who knows it? But it's not that the engineers do not know the job. It's because there is an inbuilt system where accountability is lacking. Even if a particular, an offense, if a person is found to be guilty after an inquiry, many of them get away because the judicial system allows them years and years to continue. So everywhere there is a setback. So in the presentation which I am going to make today, in spite of all that, I would say how necessary or essential it is to have a system or the systems in position, because in the absence of it, our country would have been like some of the countries in Africa, where there is total confusion, there is total lack of control, and things go in a totally sort of, undesired manner. Financial accountability was very much thought about by the constitution makers. And most of the system we inherited were from the British days. Even the public auditing system which we had was just an extension of what it continued in the 1935 sort of Government of India Act. Mr. Himanshu mentioned about the audit divas. Audit divas, now the CAG says it will be Comptroller Auditor General of India. He said the first Auditor General was appointed on 16th November, I think 1860. So the office of the Auditor General of India is more than 160 years old. It started from there. They merged the Bengal and Madras at that time as a province. Madras, Bombay and Bengal, 3 provinces had accounts set up. They were merged into one, and an Auditor General, at that time it was called Accountant General, was appointed at that time, and the system continued. After independence today, we have the 14th Auditor General now in position. So over a period of time, the office of the Auditor General has become quite a very established institution. Let us take a look at it. The accountability concept was started way back in Mauryan time when Kautilya wrote the Arthashastra. He said, a king with a depleted kosha, kosha is treasury, a depleted treasury eats into the vitals of the vitality of the citizens of the country. And then he said, this is of course, a balance must be maintained between the welfare of the people and the augmenting the resources. This is, it was one of the wise counsels which he said. And then he also said, an independent auditor, it's called Aksha Patalak Diksha, separate from the treasury, will increase accountability and reduce the scope of conflict of interest. Imagine, this was in the Arthashastra time. So we are not the one to think about accountability, but it was there all the time. Now, on audit Divas, when it was celebrated, the CAG of India requested the Prime Minister to come and address the gathering on the ceremony. In the speech, the three points he made, one was he said the minds of CAG versus government has changed. Audit is being considered an important part of value addition. Because it's not only fault finding, it is actually the value addition through performance audits, which is engaged the major center place of the auditing. That is what the Prime Minister was referring to. He also meant or invited attention by this to the time when there was virtual conflict between the CAG's office and the government after the presentation of reports on 2G spectrum, coal mine award, and things like that. So he said that is over. We accept audit as part of the public auditing, as a part of the democratic process. He also said CAG does not just keep track of the nation's accounts, which it does, but also value addition to productivity and efficiency. That refers to the performance auditing system, on which I'll spend quite some more time. And he said, CAG is an institution that has grown in importance and has created a legacy of its own with passage of time. Now, let us see what are the provisions. When the Constitution was evolved, the Constitution makers made very good provisions. As you know, Indian Constitution is one constitution which contains not only the normative things, but also a lot of procedural matters. It is the biggest constitution probably, sort of in terms of words and sections, article in the world. Now, as regards the financial provision, there is a section, and it says, the wording used is annual financial statement. We are all familiar with the word budget. We use the word budget. But the Constitution uses the word annual financial statements. And he said, the reason is this, that every money, the Constitution has divided the powers between legislature, executive, and judiciary. There is a clear separation of powers. One should not transgress into the other without reason, even though we find it's happening every day. For instance, judiciary seems to be running the executive today, starting from the COVID days, if not before. So there are aberrations like that happening, but in the Constitution, they said the executive should present every year a annual financial statement of budget, indicating what is the estimated expenditure and what are the receipts of the country. As we know, budget is presented to the parliament. The parallel system exists in the states. Now, what happens is the budget is presented for all departments, including the receipts. For instance, I think the current budget, 2021-22, is something like 35 lakh crores is the budget, roughly, central budget, of which about 15 lakhs comes from tax revenue. The rest is non-tax revenue. They estimate like this and it's submitted. Now, Parliament discusses it, budget, and it is approved. Earlier, it used to be submitted at the end of February 28th. Now, after Arun Jaitley took over, he made it in the 1st February so that you can pass the budget before the year starts. If the budget is passed before that, is not passed before that, then the government will have to go for a sort of advance, approval for advance with a short-term estimates. Now, after these financial statements or the budget is discussed, and I'll tell you one system which has been introduced now. Earlier, the budget used to be discussed in the parliament. Now there are so many departments, the time is not available. Then the parliament started selecting. The speaker will select two, three, 4 departments for detailed discussion. The rest is just taken as passed. And they will be discussed in detail. But that system was changed about 20 years ago or so. Parliament, the speaker approves budget committees, which includes representatives from both sides. They discuss the budget of a particular, the given departments with the secretary and the financial advisor, and they suggest changes, they recommend what changes should be made, they accept it and they send it to the speaker. And that is how now it is discussed. After the budget is approved, then the finance minister moves the demand for grants. That is, a finance bill is presented where what actually each department's requirement is specified and asked for approval. And then after that is passed, the third stage is when the appropriation bill is passed. Appropriation bill means that authorizes the government executive to incur expenditure. That is the third stage. Once it is approved, the budget is passed. Now, that system is continuing, and this is what the first parliament, the system of financial control. The government cannot draw money as per the constitution, except unless it is approved by the Appropriation Act. So that is one system. Appropriation approved by the parliament or legislature is first financial control, which the public auditing will check from time to time. Now, the second, I'll tell you, in the UK, there is a system that this Comptroller and Auditor General, the word came from UK. We have adopted it from UK, the British government. There, the Comptroller and Auditor General's office even gives an authorization to draw money from the treasury. In India, we don't do that. Once the budget is passed and the appropriation bill is passed, the departments are authorized to draw the money as per the finance ministry's sort of initiative. Now, there is a separate procedure for money bills. I just mentioned it because money bills are the bills which deals with the taxation. The principle in the democracy is there is no extraction without prescription, no imposition of tax without an approved law. That is from the British days. So you cannot impose a tax or levy a tax without approval of the parliament or the legislature. Now, any proposal to impose tax or anything dealing with finance, primarily, they are introduced as a money bill. Like finance bill is a money bill. Speaker certifies this is a money bill. But if a bill contains provisions for fine, for instance, suppose motor vehicle act is amended, and it says that there will be a fine or penalty for violation of the motor vehicle rule, that envisages in collection of money from the people, which will go to the government fund, consolidated fund, but that doesn't qualify itself to be a money bill. The difference is the passage of money bill. The constitution makers at that time envisaged a situation where there could be a majority in the lower house, but a minority for the ruling government in the upper house, in the Rajya Sabha, which happened when the BJP came to power. Now, what happens if a bill, normally bills are to be presented by the one house and goes to the other house, there also it has to be passed. What happens, a money bill, a bill which is wanting to spend money from the treasury, from the consolidated fund of India, is passed by the Lok Sabha, the budget is passed by the Lok Sabha, it goes to the Rajya Sabha, and then there the opposition has majority and they don't approve it. There will be a situation where the whole country will come to a standstill. Some of you may remember when Bill Clinton was the President of America, it happened. The demand of this could not be passed by the Senate, and for a few days the government was shut down virtually. So that sort of a situation doesn't happen in India because the money bill has a separate provision. And now just to understand, many of you must be knowing what is the consolidated fund and the contingency fund and public account, just as a part of the consolidated fund is the government's money. Any money which the government receives as a tax, non-tax, whatever it be, even loan, approved loan, they all are put into one fund called Consolidated Fund of India, which is created originally. And then from that fund, government can draw money for all the expenditures approved by the parliament. Now, through appropriation bill. So this is the Consolidated Fund of India. So every money which the government spends, every money when the government receives, goes into Consolidated Fund of India. There is a Consolidated Fund of State also, or union territories with the legislature. Now what happens is, if the government has not approved, anticipate an expenditure, like COVID expenditure, it was not anticipated. Suddenly it came. Government has to spend money on it. An emergency situation comes some way. Government has to spend money on it. So in such contingencies, the parliament has created a contingency fund of India with whatever is the limit which the parliament fixes. Similarly, states have, and from there the executive can draw money for urgent requirements, emergency requirements, and get it passed by the parliament or assembly subsequently by supplementary demands which are presented. So, and then the third term used in the constitution is public accounts. Now government receives a lot of money which doesn't belong to the government. An example is the contribution of government employees into Provident Fund. Everybody, every month, 10%. If now there's a new pension scheme which is different, but otherwise, then there are a lot of deposits which the government, the court deposits, different agencies collect money which are deposits, which doesn't belong to the government, but government acts as a banker. We collect the money and then sort of disperses it later, and when the requirement is made, they go into public account. These are the main concepts which you have to keep in mind. Now the constitution also, as a part of the financial sort of system, introduced the concept of a finance commission. This was mainly intended for keeping the federal structure, healthy. Because there are, as you know, there are three lists in the constitution. List, union list, state list, and concurrent list. So many of the taxes are collected by the center for its own use. Like corporate tax, company taxation, it is collected by the center and used by the center. Income tax, which is collected from all of us, that is collected by the center but shared with the states. So similarly now GST, for instance, it is collected by the center but many of it belong to state. So this sort of a distribution, how it should be made. That is one role of the Finance Commission. Second thing is, there are financially strong states. There are very financially weak states, particularly northeastern states, some states which cannot sustain on its own financial sort of resources. So there will be need for granting it from the center. So how it should be regulated, how the share of the central the tax revenue, it should be distributed to the center, in what way. Also, what should be recommended by what should be the normative principles under which the state should improve their resources, financial position. So these are all referred, once in 5 years, the Government of India appoints a Finance Commission who makes extensive recommendations, and the government normally accepts them. So that is the role of the Finance Commission. But when it comes to financial accountability, the custodian of the finance is the Finance Ministry. Finance Ministry in India, government has got three divisions mainly. One is economic affairs, which deal with all the, the monetary policy, the Reserve Bank, and things like that, or the loans from international organizations, all that they manage. Then there is the revenue. Revenue has two departments mainly. One is the Central Board of Direct Taxes, which is income tax. The other is GST and customs. That's two separate boards. They work all over India under the Finance Ministry, under the Secretary Revenue. That's the second, collecting agency. And the third one is the Department of Expenditure. That's a very important department because the entire expenditure, authorization, control, and the ways and means finance. The government's ways and means are all the money which the government receives, and you have to spend it, like a treasury officer. That is managed by the Department of Expenditure. Now, for instance, I'll give you an example. In the beginning of the year, the tax revenue and other revenues are very little. The first quarter, April to June, the government gets very little money, but expenditures are the same. They have to pay the pension, they have to pay the salaries, then other expenditure, ongoing expenditure, all that, how do we meet? So the finance ministry, the Department of Expenditure will issue guidance or sort of instructions how much each department can spend during that quarter and then keep a watch on it. And the finance ministry does it through an agency called financial advisor in each ministry or a group of ministries. Now, for instance, I was the financial advisor and joint secretary in the Department of Power, Ministry of Power. So we get instructions, we have two bosses. The financial advisor has two bosses. One, the secretary of the ministry concerned. The other is the finance secretary, the expenditure secretary. So expenditure secretary controls the financial sort of outgo, inflow, etc. through the mechanism of the financial advisor. And also, there are, many projects are set up. Government of India want to take up a new project, a scheme, like Ayushman scheme. So that scheme, where do we get the money? Is the money available? All that is expenditure. There is a public, there is a system of examining all this in the expenditure department, all the projects, schemes, etc. before they are approved, then they closely monitor it. And that is the major financial control mechanism which they have. Finance ministry has other wings like DIPAM, this is investment, disinvestment and public sector management, financial services department which manages all the regulatory authorities like SEBI, etc., etc. So there are 5 or 6 divisions, but the most important so far as financial control is concerned is the expenditure department. So now what happens is the government's accounts, they are vast. There is all over India you have offices, you have different offices. So how do we keep the account, consolidate the account? Under the finance ministry there is an officer called Controller General of Accounts. He's a counterpart of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India in a smaller way. He has people, all controllers of accounts in every ministry, every organization, or pay and accounts officers. They keep a watch and they keep the accounts of all the ministries. It is consolidated by the Controller General of Accounts. You will find the Controller General every quarter giving the results of the financial operations of the government at the end of every quarter. How much revenue was collected, how much receipt was collected. Where do you get this information if you want? The CGA is the authority who will tell you how much money has been collected. Because banks are collecting the tax, for instance, income tax, you pay through the bank. So customs is everywhere, they consolidate this information and they provide this information, consolidate it and give quarterly report, but every month they report to the expenditure secretary what is the position. And he has another role also, which is important from this area. That is, he is the internal auditor for the government. We are talking about the external auditor, which is the CAG of India, but every department is subjected to internal audit by the Controller General of Accounts, and that is a control mechanism which they have. Apart from the financial advisor's job, every proposal which involves money or which involves a liability, financial liability to the government, that is submitted to the joint secretary or additional secretary in the ministry, and he has to approve it. In fact, the financial advisor and joint secretary or additional secretary, he is kept always, the minister tries to keep him on the right side, because it's very important that, without his approval, the ministry cannot take forward any proposals, financial proposals. And most of the proposals will have some financial angle. And then, if he has a difference of opinion with the secretary, I don't agree with this particular scheme or this expenditure, then he will refer it to the finance secretary or to the finance minister directly over the head of the secretary of the department, so that they can advise the government, yes, this is not correct. So that's a very important role which is being done. And the financial scheme of India, like in UK, envisage the secretary of the department is the chief accounting authority. Even though he hardly spent time on this, in responsibility for keeping the accounts of the department, managing the accounts and internal advice, etc., is with the secretary who is the chief accounting authority. I'll make a brief mention about the FRBM Act, of which many of you may be familiar, is the Fiscal, isn't it? Fiscal Relations and Budget Management Act. Yeah. You see, the European Union, who does lot of research activities in the case of governance, they sometime in the 90s suggested that what is the best way to, after the 2000, what is the best way to ensure the financial stability of a country. It was very important to them because when the common European market came, they did not want any particular state to drag it down. So it was necessary for every country to be financially stable. So they did a lot of research and they said that the ideal situation, there are two factors. Ideal situation is one, when the fiscal deficit of a country, how it should be controlled. They said, I think a percentage related to the GDP, they said this will be the ideal. They decided that, they agreed that if you restrict to 3%, the financial stability will not be affected. The other factor which they said is the public debt, the national debt. The debt, external debt, if it goes very high, more than 45%, then the international currency fluctuation, everything affects. So they said the borrowing powers of the country should be restricted in such a way that the national debt should not go beyond a particular limit in order to sustain the financial stability of a country. Now, India followed this and implemented the passed the FRBM Act, but we have not been following it. We have not been able to follow it correctly. We hardly, Karnataka is a state, and surprisingly, which has kept the deficit with less than the FRBM provision, 3%, less than 3%. But many states and Delhi, that is tender, because we have federal structure. We have the union expenditure and the union states. If you take all together, the deficit as a ratio of the GDP of the country in India will come to 8 to 10%. If you take the states also, the center alone, the proposal was to restrict it, to bring it down from 5% to up to 3% by 2022 or something. But the pandemic has affected badly because the revenues went down and our deficit has gone up further. Now, that is another mechanism. Now, we have just covered briefly about the various financial parameters which exist. Now, let us move on to the auditing. I mentioned initially about the CAG's organization, the Comptroller and Auditor General's organization. As I said, it is inherited from the British time. In fact, till 1948, after independence, 47, 48, we had Mr. Drummond, a British Auditor General, and their terms used to be 6 years. The first Indian to take over the position after independence was V. Narahari Rao, who took it over in 48 to 54. He was the Auditor General of India. And he was responsible for, at that time, different states were the principalities. Different, like Mysore was a separate entity. So the British system followed in the British, wherever the British presidencies existed, like Madras, like Bombay, etc. But the system of accounting and auditing was very primitive, or, in many states. Some small states, Kapurthala and all that, they hardly had anything. So it was a big task for the CAG at that time to bring all this together, establish a new system of auditing, and that was done by V. Narahari Rao, who happened to be from Karnataka, incidentally. So the Constitution under Article 148 has envisaged the creation of the post of Comptroller and Auditor General of India. While moving the resolution for the article, Dr. Ambedkar mentioned that, according to me, this is the most important functionary under the Constitution, because he is the person who has to ensure that every rupee from the government's rupee is spent wisely. It is what is due is collected. So it's one of the most important positions. The Constitution has assigned him a position equal to that of a Supreme Court judge. In fact, when a CAG is appointed, he takes an oath. And that oath is exactly what a Supreme Court judge takes. abiding to the constitution. Why it is important is that we in India, the Auditor General's position is his allegiance is to the constitution. In UK, for instance, it is to the parliament. In USA, he is an officer of parliament, the Controller General of USA, which is one of the most powerful Auditor General is in the United States of America, called is the Controller General, and they used to have, earlier it was called a I think, yeah, no, it was actually, it's one of the most independent office, and but they refer to the parliament. So the parliament can ask the Auditor General, do this audit. Please take up these departments for audit. Take this scheme for audit, etc. Parliament can demand. Anyway, it cannot be under the government, because government is the audited organization. An auditor cannot be under an auditor, under the administration. So, but even if it's under parliament, it has its limitations. But in India, the constitution has said his allegiance will be to the constitution. He will be independent of both every other agency. That is what the position given to the CAG of India. His duty is very wide. He is required to audit all the income, receipt and expenditure into the consolidated fund of India, which means virtually it covers everything. And then you will find that apart from the union government and the agencies under it, he has to audit the entire railway system. It's a huge network. Then defense, it's all over India. There is an enormous workload is on the CAG to do all this. And then he also has the audit of states. Many countries, what is called the Supreme Audit Institution, that is the internationally used term for the Auditor General of the country. He does only the audit of the union government or the federal government. But in India, he is doing the audit of both state, center, and even the Panchayati Raj now. So it is very wide. There are about 40,000 people working in the department of Indian Audit and Account Department. Most of them are professionals in the same. The clerical staff are very few. Mostly it is professional auditors who are trained by the government and they take over the audit jurisdiction. Now, the CAG's independence is assured is provided by the constitution, saying that he cannot be removed, once he is appointed, he cannot be removed from the job except through impeachment, like a Supreme Court judge. He has got full freedom, and Supreme Court also, the constitution also has barred him from taking up any other position under the government, though now political, the new governments, various governments are offering political, like for instance, there was one of my Auditor General with whom I work closely, was T.N. Chaturvedi, who was governor of Karnataka. So after leaving the post, he is the person who prepared the Bofors report, which led to the downfall of the Rajiv Gandhi government at that time. But later, when the new government came, he was offered a position as a governor and he accepted. Now, there are questions. When Vinod Rai, who retired, who became very well known for his 2G report and all, he was offered a position of, the bank board chairman. He accepted it. Some of us questioned, why do you accept it? But then he had an explanation for it. But the constitution, the law, somebody had questioned all this in the law. And there is something called People's Representation Act in India. That defines what are the positions, which are the governmental positions, which are public offices. And they have not included this. That's the reason given that people are accepting. But anyway, but while in the job, he is supposed to maintain his absolute independence. Then the duties are very wide, and unusually in India and Pakistan are the only two countries in the world, to my knowledge, where they also keep accounts in some states, in many states. The basic accounts are kept by the treasury. They send the vouchers and the compiled sheets to the AG, the Accountant General of the state, who consolidate all the accounts and prepares the finance account, which is really not an audit job. So in fact, some of us felt from the beginning that this should be handed over, but the governments are not willing to take it over, and it continues as a legacy. Now, the accounting, and it's the role of CAG is basically to audit the Consolidated Fund of India, the Contingency Fund of India, and ensure the independence and report on the financial statements to the Parliament. CAG reports, submits reports every year, and these are submitted to the Parliament or the legislature, which refer it to a Public Accounts Committee for further discussion, etc. We will come to that a little later. Now, when we got independent, the Constitution said a new act should be made for defining the role of CAG. Until it is made, the British system may continue. 1971, we passed an act called CAG's Duty Power. We call it CAG DPC Act, which defines what the role of CAG. But that is outmoded. That also I'll discuss later. But that is the act now which relates to which regulates the role of CAG. Now, the CAG also prepares on the appropriation account, which is finance and appropriation account. Appropriation account will clearly say what was the voted expenditure by the Parliament. And you want to say something?
CAG report is often reported upon that. Why is it called?
Which one? The
CAG report. The CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General.
CAG. Okay, CAG's report is post-mortem report. Yeah, I'll explain that. Thank you, Manj. A good question. I think basic issue is this. Why is the question is, why is that all the CAG's reports are post-mortem report, right? In fact, the same question was raised by the former president, our great president, Abdul Kalam, when he visited the CAG's office. He told that you people prepare reports after the event is over, which doesn't really help us. Why don't you prepare concurrently? Now, there are two types of audit. As I mentioned, internal audit and external audit. Basically, the job of the auditor is to verify the financial statements and the transaction when they are carried out, and then report on them for the benefit of in the company, in the benefit of the shareholders. In the case of the government or public auditing to the Parliament for use as well as for the public. Now, the CAG is not expected to carry out a concurrent audit or simultaneous audit. That is the management audit, management's duty, which is done by the internal audit. So basically, everywhere the report is on the results of what happened, the outcome or the output of what has been committed. You comment on it to the knowledge of the government. Now, in the case of performance audit, there is a slight difference. I'll bring it out when I discuss about it. But if you see the financial audit of a company, it is not when the transaction is being carried out. It's at the end of the year, the shareholders would know whether the accounts are prepared properly, whether there is anything irregularities in this, and for their use it is submitted to the Board of Audit to present it to the shareholders, general body. Same situation is in the case of external audit. So a distinction has to be made between the two. Now, CAG cannot be moving around all over the country and doing the audit simultaneously, because that doesn't conceptually or even practically that's not possible. That is the reason. Now, let's go to what I said is finance report is actually tells the appropriation accounts are submitted, it has to be submitted actually after the year is over as early as possible. But it is getting delayed. That is one of the subject of research by Mr. Professor Himanshu, who says there has been undue delay, which he has been commenting on it. But that report tells what was the amount approved by the legislature for expenditure, how much actually was spent, was there a saving, was there a excess, or was within. In fact, in the Karnataka finance report, which has been presented recently, you will find that large number of unspent expenditure is there. Lot of savings are there many departments were not able to spend money in the year not now. Now I can understand because of pandemic. Talking about 1920 also, you will find that many departments were not spending the money allocated to them for some reason or other, which will be questioned or can be questioned by the public or by the legislature. So finance report gives that sort of a picture. This is again a clarification of what I said. All the consolidated fund and contingency fund transactions are subjected to audit. But I must caution here, it is not 100% audit which is done by the CAG. It's not possible because of the voluminous transaction. When the auditors go to audit, they take 2-3 months, normally 2 months. They select 2 months vouchers and do an intensive study. So it's a representative or sample audit which is being carried out. On the basis of it, auditors come to a judgment. So it's not 100% audit which is being done, but transactions are covered. Then the Act says manufacturing and trading accounts are units under department. This is, I've just copied from the CAG's DPC Act, because at that time when it was implemented, many departmental undertaking used to be there, and their account, they are not part of department but working within the department. And like transport department, ministry departments used to have a transport workshop. They used to keep the accounts in a commercial pattern, so they are all covered by that. Then there are a lot of grant-in-aid bodies and autonomous bodies. You can think of IIT or All India Institute of Medical Science. There are ICMR. So many organizations government have. The CAG will do audit of all these organizations. They get grant-in-aid. Every year the government decides what grant should be given, because many of them are not self-financing. So that expenditure is they are submitted to audit by the CAG of India. There are other cases where grants are given to, let's say, an NGO working in the field of child welfare. The Ministry of Child and Social Welfare decides to give them a grant of 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs. So when they are given like this, if it is, there are some criteria given, where hundreds of units, thousands of units is not possible, but the Act itself says if the grant is more than 1 crore rupees, or if the grant amount to more than 75% of the total expenditure, then the CAG can do the audit. CAG should do the audit. So this is called grant-in-aid audit, which is carried. So it's again spread all over. Now the case of public sector undertakings, the the company law has provided for this, and it is like this. Every company has an auditor, a commercial auditor, chartered accountants firm who does the audit. But they are selected on the basis of the recommendation of the CAG from a panel maintained by the CAG, and they are rotated. CAG rotates not 3 years only, they give it to a firm, so that there's rotation. Now, over and above what the chartered accountants do, the CAG's representatives go and study the accounts, and they make comment. They find a lot of comments like, profitability, or the profits overstated, the expenses understated, various incidents they find across, and then they make comments on them and submit along with the audit report of the private auditors. Now, another major area of audit is CAG's is receipts. All the receipts are audited by CAG, like income tax all over India, customs, income tax, central excise, or sort of GST. All these are audited by the CAG of India. Not 100%, as I said, it's done on a representative basis, sample basis, and then they check the system. CAG's office goes and studies how efficient is the system, that sort of a system. Like when computerization of income tax assessment started, they brought out a lot of lacuna in this, saying that this has to be corrected. Or there are cases where even the refunds due are not given to the taxpayers in time. So CAG can comment on it. Every year, CAG brings out separate reports on income tax, customs, GST, etc., etc. It's a vast area of audit. Then there are certain audits given to the CAG where the government wants to take over some audit. Like, let's say a company, an audit which CAG is not required to do, a grant-in-aid institution. So the government will say that please do this audit for us, and the CAG can do a consent audit. Now the CAG started doing the local audit bodies. The constitution says audited accounts of these bodies The state government has actually, but what they are doing is CAG cannot do all the panchayats and all the municipalities and all that. They selectively they do, like BDA or BBMP they might be doing, but they will not do all the municipalities. They are done by chartered accountants, but CAG does a verification audit. This is a vast area. Now, after the recent years, a lot of new financial instruments have come, as some of you know. Public-private partnership. During the UPA government, there was a big thrust for it, which did not take up as it should have been. Many roads, many activities, commercial government activities were shared with the public-private airports, for instance. Airports were given as public-private partnership, right? And CAG has done very good audits, like Delhi airport, and it is contracted out to sort of private sector. Then after 3 years, CAG did a review and pointed out how the revenue sharing arrangement is faulty. Now things like that, these are the new area of audit which CAG has to do. The other is, there are a lot of non-departmental agencies. Actually, a lot of money is kept outside the government as personal deposit, PDA, personal deposit account. Like, a government takes up let's say, COVID program to prevent it. They will form a new vehicle, a new agency who will take it out and transfer the entire money to that agency, and they are actually kept outside the jurisdiction of the government. In the UK, when a similar situation arose, they examined the entire thing and they brought a new act saying that the non-departmental agencies also should be brought under the CAG's audit, which India has not done yet. But the courts have moved in. The Supreme Court has said in a couple of cases, you remember that there was a case where there was an arrangement with let us say with this thing, Reliance, I think, group, about the petroleum, the extraction of petrol from the sea. And the arrangement was that a percentage of the whatever profit will go to the government. Government was not getting the profit. CAG was asked to go into that. He did an audit. Then the companies protested, saying that we don't want a government audit. It went up to the Supreme Court. Same thing happened in the case of telephone revenue sharing, which they had with telecom revenue sharing. There also, the Supreme Court said CAG is not just an accountant. Wherever government money is involved, he has a right to audit. That was another area which has come into the thing. Now, what the CAG's audit is mainly on 3 areas. One is financial audit. That is, the accounts of the departments are verified, and the government CAG ensures that the accounts are drawn up properly, correctly, and then sort of there are no mistakes in it. And that is the financial audit, like done in any other organization, which is a financial audit. Second is compliance audit. There are a lot of rules and regulations to be followed in spending money. Are they followed? Are they sort of completely kept to? That is the compliance audit. These are the traditional audit which a chartered accountant does, CAG's office does, and this is the sort of type of finance and compliance audit. The third is called value for money audit. Value for money audit is basically in the performance audit, we call it, and that is based on 3 criteria: economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Now, the OECD had gone into it and said, good governance requires continuing oversight to ensure that policy is implemented as sort of intended. Now, here an important question comes: to what extent audit can encroach into policy? Strategies are met, and the overall performance of the government meets the expectation and need within policy, laws, and regulations. This is the primary aim of audit, which means it should push towards good governance. That is the proposal of the OECD in respect of public audit. And the CAG, there is an organization called INTOSAI. It is called International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, where India plays a major role. All the 190 or so auditor generals of various countries, they are into this under the United Nations, and they decide the major policy decisions of public auditing. And there they said the Supreme Audit Institution, which is CAG, encourage and support the performance of public duties in accordance with the principles of good governance, help build integrity, transparency and accountability and public confidence by enabling oversight, accountability and governance. This is the basic, the principle of audit according to International Audit Organization, which every CAG is required to follow. Which in other case, audit should be, as Prime Minister said, it's an additionality or it's a support for the good administration. They also said, OECD said, they can provide insight, improve the functioning of the process. There are different processes in implementing any scheme. Go into the process, programs, and foresight to aid governments in adapting to future trends and risks. Such evidence-based contributions to addressing systemic issues can lead to better policy formulation, etc. The idea is this, apart from looking into vouchers, apart from looking into expenditure per se, look into the processes of program, how it is implemented, what are the deficiencies, what are the lacunae in it, and then try to help the government, improve the governance process. Now, as I mentioned, financial and compliance audit, that mainly ensures the accuracy, integrity and reliability of financial statements which are prepared by the executive at the end of the year. Public auditing by CAG, on the other hand, it gives a credibility. What is the main advantage of an audit? It gives an assurance to the shareholders or to the public or the legislator that everything is okay, finance is okay, financial statements are okay. That sort of credibility to government accounts is given after the CAG completes the audit. And performance audit, the third category which I mentioned, it adds an additional value by providing an independent, outsider's view, objective view. And then it's all based on either documents or data. And then it gives a reliable view and assessment of the progress of the programs, including in the performance audit, what are the outputs expected of the program? What are the outcome? Now we have a system called output budget. Some of you may know. The Government of India has introduced output budget. Every expenditure when it's incurred, department will say, this is what I aim to achieve out of this. This is the outcome, this is the output. That is verified in the performance audit. That's a major issue. And then it comes as a very comprehensive report. Now, performance audit, which is the mainstay of audit. The CAG submitted something like 127 reports in the last year, even in spite of pandemic, of which 67 or so were performance audit reports. I will come to one performance report in a little detail after this. Now, it includes the financial and compliance audit, whether accounts are correct, whether the sort of financial statements are drawn up correctly, properly, whether it includes all the required information, all the standards. That's all covered by compliance and financial auditing. After that, they go into the verification of outputs. Any program which the government or the scheme, now they say that Ayushman program will cover 40 crores of people. Or let us say any scheme will have a number of beneficiaries. Have they achieved it? Have they, to what extent it has achieved? What are the bottlenecks in achieving? That sort of detailed into it, the auditor goes. And then in the performance audit, quite often beneficiary surveys are included. There was a case, I'll tell you, CAG took up the audit of an agriculture debt relief scheme. I think thousands and thousands of agriculture loans were written off. And CAG conducted an audit about it and found that in many cases, the amounts did not reach the correct beneficiary. Amounts were spent, but did not reach the right person. Now, that sort of they could get it through a beneficiary survey. And this is also done in the new concept, which is social audit. CAG is not doing it, but social audit is carried out by, voluntary agencies like in Rajasthan, under that, there is an organization which started this. In a Panchayati Raj, if there is a scheme, let us say a scheme to construct a check dam, the expenditure, how much was incurred. So the social auditors, who are the local people who are trained, they are asked to go into the accounts. They see the site verification and see, and then come to an audit finding to how much expenditure really was justified, whether there was any fraud in it. All this they check up, and then all the local people are called in the social audit and discussed. And the officers are also asked to be present there. So the lady, a beneficiary will say under the Mahatma Gandhi rural employment scheme, she will say, I never got any job. But in the accounts, it may have been written saying that so-and-so person given 10 days job, 100 days job. So there is a possibility of fraud like this everywhere. The social audit, because it is done local level and by autonomous agencies, they immediately comes to the to the actual position. Now in the performance audit, there is nothing preventing a beneficiary survey being carried out, and that is one of the advantages of the performance audit scheme. And it includes experts. For instance, a road, CAG, suppose he is verifying a road, he will not have the expertise to know whether the road is the road mix is of correct quantity or quality. So he will draw the services of let us say Indian Road Congress or Road Institute. Wherever is required, possible, they will invite outside expert to join. Like in the report which on the drain management, the stormwater drain management here, the local AG requested ISRO to help them on the geospatial studies. So experts are involved in the studies. And then the program implementation, how efficient it is checked by the CAG. And then it also includes a lot of recommendation for improvement. Whatever the CAG does after discussion, what should be done to improve the process of program implementation, that is included. It partly answers the question which you raised. The advantage of simultaneous audit comes into this through the performance audit. Now, here I will stop for a minute and talk about, we started discussing about corruption. Corruption and fraud basically are twins. They go, side by side. Fraud happens mostly from within the organization. Corruption quite often either within the organization of the people who accept money for services rendered, or outsiders, like influencing the government decision and things like that. But corruption, it was not started now here. The corruption started with the British East India Company. The Robert Clive, as you know, he was the man who really established the empire in India. Some of you may know that he joined as a clerk. I think he was in Karnataka, in Bangalore, as a clerk in the East India Company, a writer. Then he gradually got into their army, went there and defeated the Nawab in the Plassey battle, and he virtually took over that. He put Miraj Jafar, Miraj Jafar, the man who betrayed the. Yeah, and he was made and Namke was the titular Nawab, and East India Company took over everything. This Clive became very rich because immediately after the war, he negotiated from the company and got. The company would have paid $30,000 pounds, 30,000 pounds, huge amount at that time, every year to the Nawab for allowing them to do cultivation locally and trading. He said, now that I have got you the sort of administration, this Miraj has come, you give me that money. So he negotiated, and his annual income was 30,000 pounds, which is equal to about 7 crores in today's term of rupees. He left India after his term, and then he had, I am told, about something equivalent to 250 crores worth of money with him, about 250,000 pounds or more with him. He went there and lived in a very, very stylish way in UK. He purchased a peerage and he became a member of the parliament. But he had enemies because many people knew that he went as a writer and then he has come with so much of money. There were political opponents and all. And they initiated an inquiry against him, parliamentary inquiry. And in the inquiry, when he was examined, this is the answer which he gave. He said, "A great prince was dependent on my pleasure. An opulent city lay at my mercy." That is Kolkata. Its richest bankers bid against each other for my smiles. I walked through walls which were thrown open to me alone, piled on either hand with gold and jewels. Mr. Chairman, at this moment I am astonished at my own moderation. That is the type of corruption which we had at the time of East India Company. One of my friends said the British, they started the East India Company to trade with India and they made a lot of money. You know, corruption was common. In fact, incidentally, I believe Clive himself in some context told about the rule in India, British company rule. He said there is total confusion, exploitation and merciless treatment of the people in 3 states, Bengal, Bihar and Orissa at that time, which I have never seen anywhere in the world. And that's what he complained about his colleagues after he left. And as you know, Clive's policy was also responsible for the great Indian famine at the time, that is 1770. So corruption was there at the time and it started all over. So as I said, my friend said East India Company, EAST, East India Company, isn't it? Now they said after independence, politicians have joined together and formed a company. It is Eat India Company. You cut off the S, then become Eat. So Eat India Company became the policy of the political wisdom in India. I don't know whether, to contest an election, for instance, how many crores are required? 8 crores, 10 crores, 15 crores? How much money are they declaring? Politicians. The Legislative Council election, which is going to take place here, they said the one candidate has declared 1,700 crores as his income. Nobody has declared less than 1 or 2 crores. So that is the type of money which is going into corruption. So corruption is corruption is something which happens, in the all over, and then to what extent can the CAG can prevent it? CAG's office has issued a standing order on corruption and fraud. A fraud is, something which affects the financial statements. Like you remember Satyam computer case. The management had drawn all the money from the bank, but when the auditors came, they gave a false, fixed deposit receipt for 9,000 rupees, which was very high amount those days, and produced. The auditors verified it and clicked it. Now, into the financial statements, the asset portion or the asset side in the balance sheet, there was an amount of 7,000 crores, let us say. But actually, there was no money in the bank. The auditor's duty was to verify with the bank whether it is correct, whether it's available. They didn't do that. That is why the Institute of Chartered Accountants took action against them and CBI also went against them. So this is how the fraud takes place. Again, going back to Kautilya, Chanakya, he said the government servants, he said those days, I don't know whether you heard about it, but government servants are like fish in the water. You can never make out when the fish drinks water. Can you? You watch the fish when it's drinking water. You cannot make out. That's what Chanakya said those days about the possibility or the potentiality for corruption in the government. So it happens. It is happening despite all this. But there are possibilities. Now what the auditors do to prevent this is see whether there is a proper internal system to check corruption. And we will go into a little detail after that. But what happened to the reports which CAG submit? I think, am I overshooting? Anyway, I'll complete it now. The public, the reports of CAG are presented to the parliament or the legislature as may be. which are referred automatically to the Public Accounts Committee, for which normally the opposition leader is chairman. In fact, Karnataka is going to celebrate 100 years of the Public Accounts Committee, even during the, the Maharaja time or British time we had. So that committee deliberates. It will have a chairman usually from the opposition, members from all parties. They discuss the audit report. They call not the minister, they call the official, discuss with them, and then they verify and then follow it up and make recommendation what action should be taken to the parliament, which will approve, and then it is to be approved by, implemented by the executive. Now the problem is in the central government, so many audit reports are there. The Public Accounts Committee says we cannot discuss all. They will just pick and choose 3, 4, 5, 10 paragraphs or chapters, incidents, and that they are only discussed. The rest of it, what happens, it goes to the department. They have to prepare action taken note and send it to CAG, and CAG verifies it and prepares a compliance report, which again goes to the parliament. So the system is not very effective. Now, for the comments or the report relating to public sector undertakings, it goes to the Committee on Public Undertakings, a similar body which exists. And then occasionally, joint parliamentary committees are appointed by the parliament, like in the case of 2G spectrum, which did not come to a settlement. Now, let us see what are the drawbacks in the system. One is the CAG's Act is outmoded. It doesn't cover all the areas where CAG should audit. It doesn't even define what is audit. It doesn't say what is performance audit, because that audit was not existing at that time. So this, and then the independence of the CAG should be protected more. It doesn't include. You see, every important functionary is appointed through a system thanks to the judiciary. Chairman, Vigilance Commission, or the election commissioner, all that now is appointed by a committee, Prime Minister, Home Minister or the concerned minister, and the opposition leader. They go through, at least there is a semblance of selection. But in the case of CAG, nobody wants that. And they want only as an appointment like any other secretary is appointed. So if the government would like to appoint a person who is known to them as a secretary, who is, who they think is convenient to be appointed. If it's a person is a rebel, if he's too independent, they will not consider him. So system itself is wrong, and the CAG's Act needs to be amended. Then the departments and officials, they are they try to avoid by delaying even giving information. There is no way CAG can compel the departments to give information in time, even unless he files a request, an application under the RTI Act, CAG Act. It contains 90 days or 45 days or whatever it be. CAG's Act doesn't even mention that. CAG's Act also doesn't say when the report should be presented. CAG should have a compulsion. You should present the finance account or within 3 months after the closure of the year or 6 months after the closure of the year. There's no date given, so there's nothing binding on CAG. Then there's nothing binding on the government to present it to the parliament. Government can delay. In fact, Himanshu has written a very interesting article about it. So there is lacuna everywhere. Now, the jurisdiction is too vast for CAG. There is a need to reduce. For instance, CAG should shed off the accounting function. CAG should focus on certain given areas, because otherwise jurisdiction is too wide. And then delay, there is tremendous delays in submission. In discussion also, state government, the State Public Accounts Committee discussed the entire audit report, but they are 4 years, 5 years behind. It doesn't serve any purpose in discussing such reports after 4 years, 5 years. So that is different, problems which exist in the system. Then when audit reports on issues relating to policy are submitted, the parties take a clear division. This is opposition supports. The same opposition, when they come to power, they oppose. I mean, it's become very partisan. That an approach which unfortunately doesn't improve the public audit, help the audit system. And the media, for instance, in many other countries, audit reports, the substance is highly publicized through media. It doesn't happen here. Now, how can we improve the accountability? That's a question which I would like to conclude. One is the government itself can improve the financial accountability. The internal audit and the internal control has to be strengthened. What is internal control? You see, for instance, I'll give you an example. Cashier in an office is a very sort of position where there is a possibility of manipulation or sort of fraud or doing mischief. Now, you allow the same person to continue for 10 years. He will become an expert. He is an expert, so nobody wants to shift him because he is an expert in this job. But what happens is continuation like that will create sort of vested interest. So there should be a system not only to supervise at every level appropriately. I'm not saying that there should be one supervisor for every section. No, not like that. But the supervisory system should be efficient. Then it should also be internal control system like periodic rotation. I'll give you if I have time, a little more time. Okay. There was in UN audit when we were at the United Nations audit in Geneva, we found that among all the other things, there was a training officer, an expert from one of the European countries. He used to be in charge of training, used to conduct training, claim money, and bills used to be passed regularly. Unfortunately for him, he took to heavy drinking, and because of alcoholism, he fell sick and he was admitted in a hospital. So there was a gap of 1 or 2 months, and somebody else was asked to look after the charge. Then that person found this man was, faking a lot of certificate. He will, because most of the trainings are outsourced. He will, prepare a notice for training, a proposal for training, and give it to a company which doesn't exist. And then after the training is over, because the candidates will be taken from different units in different region, he will prepare a bill, having completed successfully training, this is the money to be paid, and he used to take that money. The other person said there was no such training, but money is gone. That is how the internal system went wrong, but years and years he continued and became an expert where he had an opportunity to do fraud. So internal control system should be improved. Then, as I said, there's a need for a new National Audit Act. There should be better budget implementation. I cannot go too much detail into it, but this is an area where, while talking about internal audit, the center has at least a reasonably good system of internal audit under the Controller General. Some of the states in Karnataka, I had an occasion to discuss, there is virtually no internal audit system at all. That's a total failure. Then one way of improving it is make audit committees for every department with people who are aware, people who are interested. Those committees should periodically review the audit reports of each department and then follow it up with the secretary. That's another way of probably doing it. Fraudulent transactions should be punished, brought to notice. Normally what happens is he is suspended and then the inquiry is carried out. Recently there was a judgment you must have seen some of the judgment where a bank employee did a fraud and he was removed from service. And he filed against it saying that it's a small offense which I committed, but the judge came, small or big, fraud is fraud and you should suffer. That should be the attitude. Then in the US Auditor General's office there is a telephone. Anybody can ring up any fraud he comes across, any irregularity, any contract award. Before awarding the contract, if there is a fudging of the contract, immediately they can telephone. And the Auditor General will stop the award of the contract, inquire into it, and then he will give clearance. Whistleblowers are encouraged. That system doesn't exist here. And there should be better awareness of the audit within and outside the government. Now, I mentioned that CAG's jurisdiction is very wide. As I said, he submitted so many audit reports, and performance reports are 67. And now he has started number of various processes and things like that. But the important thing is, he's maintaining GPF accounts of 28 lakh employees, and he is not paying pension, authorizing pension for 56 lakh employees in India. These are all jobs which affects the efficiency of the organization, which probably could have been done with. So thank you very much I've taken a lot of your time, and I think it's a fairly boring subject. But then I hope, yes, thank you for sitting through that and showing interest in the subject. Thank you very much. This is, you can get it at the website of the CAG. This is a report on the, as I said, the stormwater drainage system in Bangalore. And CAG has brought out lot of, for instance, there were 1800 water bodies in Bangalore about 200 years ago. Today it is just about 300 or 400. So he has drawn the picture, the maps, with the help of ISRO, how it has the over-construction, the lack of planning, how it is affected. And, he has taken photographs, because there were no data or records available in ordinary audit. In this case, CAG requested the government to form joint inspection, teams along with the department, went to various places, photographed for like in Koramangala, they have shown a drainage which is filled up with muck, and all that they have photographed and put it in this report. So that if you want to know about how, the performance report can be effective, this is one example where you can find it on the CAG's website. Right, thank you very much. Thank you.
One last question.
One minute. I will come to Q&A. We have time. The guest is still with us. I just wanted to tell, we didn't start on time, but we stopped on time. 3:30 it is in my mobile. And we will take about 15 minutes to half an hour for Q&A. Be patient, don't leave the hall. Ask your questions. But as he said, like, we would be starting to ask better questions if we start reading audit reports. I was mentioning audit divas, and
Should I sit here?
I was mentioning audit divas, and what I find surprising is that our elected representative, cutting across party lines, likes to lecture auditors. And I have wished that Indian Parliament would have parliamentarians who wish to listen to auditors, who will invite. Have you seen a parliamentary session where a CAG auditor with his team of 17, 18 deputy CAGs is invited to address the session? Tell me if you have seen that. How many minutes we spend discussing the audit reports in Parliament? Again, when the next parliamentary session takes place, please try to check calendar. It would mostly be located on the last date, last hour, when an MP from Erode would have taken his flight to come back to Erode and things like that. So there are very simple things that could be made better. So when I started reading audit reports way back in 2002, I used to think that the first reform that I want in my audit reports is that the last line shall not read, so and so matter was referred to government in March 2019. When we closed this audit report and finalized in December 2019, the government has not yet given a reply. That used to be the typical last line, 2002, 2003. That last line doesn't remain, it has changed. It has changed a lot. Many more performance audit has entered, so like, if you are interested, there is a new performance audit on flood in Kerala that happened in 2018. The preparedness and response to floods is a very good performance audit report. I have been reading it for some time. I am reading the 3rd chapter now, alongside my every week duty of teaching ecology and development and environmental justice in India. Over to you for your questions. Raise your hands. Mics are there. We will pass the mics for.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, it's a fascinating thing, as in like, how does the social audit system integrate with the broader institutional framework of audit, and how effective is it?
Short answers, but as teachers often do, bibliography. When Vinod Rai was in the office, the CAG of India invited many of the experts on social audit, and the stalwarts in civil society, having started the Right to Information movement, to sit with the audit office and the staff there at the headquarters, and they prepared a guideline on how to look at social audit. That guideline, that document is there on CAG of India website. CAG of India website is cag.gov.in. Go download the report, it's a PDF file, read it.
Social audit. Actually, there was a lot of attention given to social audit at a time. And Andhra Pradesh and Rajasthan is the pioneer. And they conducted a lot of social audits. In CAG sent people as observers, officers as observers, to see that it is conducted in the proper way. And then, as he said, prepared a manual, I mean a report, how to integrate the social audit with the CAG's audit. But it has not really taken on, because unfortunately, but that's an area which probably has to be looked into, because the real the result of what happens at the site in the ground level, that comes through this sort of a study. That is what had to be done.
Yeah, in the recent days, there was a great reference to the PM CARES. And does CAG have any access to audit the PM CARES, or who acts as a custodian to the PM CARES?
Yeah, PM's care fund. Actually, I personally think that, I mentioned here about non-governmental departmental agencies. In the UK, a situation was this, where a lot of money was kept outside the government. So government at that time, the Chancellor of Exchequer, he appointed a commission under one Lord Sharman, who is a financial expert. And he suggested that wherever there is government money, money which should belong to the government is spent, it should be, follow the rupee. That should be the principle. Where there is an expenditure on behalf of the government, it should be subjected to audit. Now, there they amended the Act, National Audit Act, and brought all that into the area. Now, in the case of PM Care Fund, there is really no reason not to subject it to the audit of the CAG. Because you find that the contribution to PM Care Fund gets income tax concession, rebate under ATC or ATD. So now, the entire money is supposed to be collected, including from public sector funds are mainly giving the money to that. Then lot of people are donating and everything, and it is managed by an undersecretary in this PM Secretariat. Absolutely no reason, no justification. But government has kept it aside, outside the CAG's audit. And our only hope is the judiciary steps in, because there is a case pending. I think, Prashant Bhushan, the lawyer, has filed a case. And I hope that the 90%, I am sure the decision will be that it should be brought under the audit of the CAG. See, the executive will always like to keep things outside, because they don't want a scrutiny by a public auditor. Right, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing this information with us. I have two questions. My first question is about foreign funding that comes into our country. I wanted to know if CAG has any role in keeping an eye on what happens with foreign funding, whether it is for private companies or it is for the civil society organizations.
The foreign assistance, is it? No.
Yes.
Okay.
So both foreign investments as well as foreign aid that comes into our country.
May I take it first? You see, the most of the foreign assistance which comes, the CAG only does the World Bank projects within India. He does the audit on behalf of the World Bank. World Bank has authorized them to do the audit. Suppose a development scheme is funded by the World Bank partly, then it is subjected to audit. But any foreign assistance coming to the government for a particular money as such coming as a how does it come? It comes as a external assistance. It does, normally government doesn't accept any money, like that, unless for a particular scheme, like through an NGO or an agency. So whether that body is included in the CAG's audit jurisdiction. Suppose for an IIT, let's say the German government gives a grant of, let us say, X amount. Directly it will not come into the audit, but IIT's audit is done by the CAG when they will check it up. Now I'll stop you. I'll tell you here. There is an organization called KIFBI in Kerala. It's called Kerala Investment Finance Corporation or something. Mainly that corporation, it was established to raise money for development programs in Kerala, like hospital, highway, etc., by raising money, loans, assistance, etc., from Gulf countries where there are a lot of Keralites. Now, CAG wanted to do audit of that body. The government refused. Government said, no, your audit will bring out a lot of things, so investor confidence will be lost. But CAG was able to do an audit because they got the initial money was given as a grant in aid. So CAG under the Act said, I have a right to do the audit of grant in aid, and they did. And now they have come out with a very scathing report how the corporation is raising so much of money for which the government of Kerala is giving guarantee, which is a liability on the government. If they fail, government has to pay. So they have now highly criticized. So that sort of assistance can come into not as an audit of the external assistance scheme as such, but hardly we get any assistance. Like World Bank gives money as a ways and means advance. If it is given, it doesn't really have to be audited. But if it is given to a program or then it gets. See, I was chairman of a company, World Bank aided company, in Himachal Pradesh, and we got $400 million at that time as World Bank assistant. So what happened is the entire money spent was World Bank money. So the two audits were done. One company's audit was done, and the other CAG will do as a World Bank assisted scheme to report to the World Bank on the integrity of the expenditure. So that's how it goes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
I have another question.
Yeah.
You spoke about performance audits. So my question was that does CAG have any role in also doing performance audits for the public education systems?
If CAG, I think I'm not aware whether they have done, but there is nothing preventing CAG doing a study on the education, national education scheme. If it is any program of the government, because there is government expenditure involved, it comes under the government's thing. Health scheme, yes, they have done. For instance, what was that scheme where NRHM, that was done by CAG. Then the schools were given an assistance under a Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. That CAG brought out a study. So they do. Any schemes which have public this investment, CAG can do, and they select carefully what are every year, and they do schemes by rotation. They do the performance audit. Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
sir.
you. Okay.
Hello. So if you check on indiatogether.org, you will see that there was a CAG audit of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and one of your teachers have written on that audit a small 1,200 words article. By the way, you should read the original source report, because 1,200 words article will not do justice, because it is more than 100 page of performance audit of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. And anyone who is doing MA education at Azim Premji University sitting in this hall, please try and get that report. If you don't get, send me an email. I'll give you a copy of the performance audit.
Okay.
Any questions from this part? Satyajit? Any questions from this side? Because, yeah. Can someone?
हेलो सर, मैं ये जानना चाहता हूँ कि ये जो सोशल ऑडिट करते हैं ग्राउंड पे, हिंदी सही है ना? हाँ। तो मैंने झारखंड सोशल ऑडिट टीम के साथ काम किया था, तो वहाँ पे ग्राउंड लेवल पे जो ऑडिट होते हैं, तो जो टीम वहाँ पे ऑडिट करने जाते हैं, जिनका ऑडिट होता है, वो कभी कभी क्या करते हैं कि उन्हीं को पैसा दे के वो अपना वहाँ पे काम निपटा लेते हैं। तो मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि क्या वो सोशल ऑडिट टीम के मेंबर अगेन किसी और ऑडिटर से ऑडिट किए जाते हैं या नहीं, फर्दर ऑडिट होता है या नहीं?
How do I answer that? We cannot say that there is no corruption even among the auditors. It happens. For instance, many of the chartered accountants who do the company audit of companies, they have, in spite of all the restrictions by the Institute of Chartered Accountants, there are compromises made by them. In the department of CAG where I worked, there are complaints. Once we used to get complaints, particularly from the audit of taxes. The auditors used to go for tax, that is the sales tax for it at that time. I was Accountant General Madras. I got a complaint that auditors were accepting hospitality from the sales tax officers, and and then naturally there will be compromise. So there is a vigilance officer in the CAG's office who is supposed to verify, who goes verify, and the CAG take very strong action if it come to notice. But in the case of social audit you mentioned, no, social audit, what has happened is, again, it is the local people who are trained to become auditors by the social audit agency. Now, their integrity has to be checked. In the case of, everywhere rotation is important. If the same people keep going there, then there is a possibility of collusion. They become friendly. So one of the important internal control in the audit is we don't send the same party again and again to the same place. We rotate, people change. See people working in this section, we shift to the other section because they don't get familiarity with the auditee organization. It's a very tricky question to answer. I don't rule out that doesn't happen. It does happen, and there are cases where even very sort of some senior officers were dismissed because they were supposed to. One person of the rank of accountant general in Tamil Nadu was the CBI raided, and he was dismissed from service, was suspended immediately because there was suspicion that he had agreed to accept some money to drop a case. So it's a very, very, very delicate area, but then it has to be ruled out by strict vigilance. That's all what I can say. That's all. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Hi, sir. I have two questions. One, how did the RTI movement kind of impact how the CAG publishes reports and the kind of impact it had on how people access these reports? And another thing is, I think this is just a follow-up on what Himanshu had said in the mail today. What kind of changes did the environment policies and just the environmental auditing what's been the trajectory in terms of how the CAG audits them, especially with all these national parks and accountability of these compensation schemes, even the NTCA for that matter, right? So what role does the CAG play here, and what has the general trajectory of the environmental auditing been? So, yeah.
Okay, very, very good question. You see, the CAG started environmental auditing somewhere about 15, 20 years. In fact, I had the privilege of preparing the environmental audit manual for CAG after my retirement. When I came here, I prepared it. We collected the various international conventions, orders and things like that, and to what extent they should be applied to the Indian situation. This is what, so CAG does environmental audit. Not only that, CAG has started an institute in Rajasthan, an institute of environmental auditing, where he is training people from different countries, more than 60, 70 countries. Auditors have been trained in taking up the audit of environmental concerns. That is, and many performance audit reports will build into it the environmental aspects. For instance, the audit report here on the stormwater drainage, if you find how the environment has affected the flooding in Bangalore, they have brought it out. And what, for instance, they are saying that the unrestricted construction and destruction of the foliage, the trees and things like that, has resulted in the disconnection of interconnectivity between major drains. Otherwise, this drain, they are all interconnected originally when this is a small city. But now they have all got filled up, or they've got built up over. So as a result, this is affecting this thing. Then they have brought out how the lakes, the pollution in the lakes, how it is affecting the health of the people through, infection causing, mosquitoes and various things, how it is happening. All that they have brought it out. So CAG has started building into his report, into his audit, the environmental aspects, and he is a pioneer in the world. He is training others. Then the other aspect is now that recently CAG has announced that they are going to encourage a national mineral source accounting, and they are issued the guidelines and they're preparing, asking the states. You say the constitution itself in the directive principles say that the national wealth should not be sort of disposed of irresponsibly, that it should be preserved. So constitution itself provides for it, and CAG has now said that he start encouraging all the states to build up a national mineral deposit accounts so that every exploitation of the mineral, and in the guidelines issued by the CAG, they even say that, you remember in Karnataka there was a case where a lot of iron ore were exported on the basis of one license. They can talk. So how to prevent all that they have brought in. So this is an area of concern which is being built into the performance audit system. What was the first question? I didn't.
I was just wondering what the RTI movement has had on public accountability and the role of the CAG under that.
Yeah. Actually, CAG's audit, I don't, as I said, RTI has become more powerful than the CAG's Audit Act. Because RTI, you can, if you make a request and if you don't get the document or information within a particular number of days, there's a way to go about it, appealing and things like that. CAG's office asks for data and conveniently they don't make it available. So that the moment you don't give, then there's no question of audit. So RTI is actually in a way even more powerful than the Audit Act. That's why we are saying that Audit Act should be amended. Initiative was started about 10 years ago or more by Vinod Rai's time, but it is still in the limbo. It has not moved forward because in fact, the then finance minister told that I will get it implemented. I get it through, Pranab Mukherjee. But soon after the reports on 2G, etc. came, and then it was just pushed by the finance minister. Nobody has the courage to take it forward or the enthusiasm. We hope it will be taken. Okay. I think that's it. Yeah.
That's last question, okay? We will close with that.
Yeah, sir, I have a question. So, since you mentioned about the vast area of jurisdiction of CAG,
Which one was
the vast area of jurisdiction that CAG has.
Yeah.
So, in my sense, it's like, so there are certain things that you can do as discretion also, like the CAG takes a call on like what to audit and what to not. So, where this decision comes, I'm interested in knowing that who makes that decision, that, oh, is there a red flag which is raised and then someone calls a red flag and then it's raised, or is it like, how is that decision being?
Okay. I will start saying this. That's why the role of the CAG is very important. In India, CAG is duty bound to the constitution. So he has no government can dictate to him, do this, don't do this. No parliament can tell him. Parliament cannot say that you do this area of audit, you don't do this, you cannot so. Whereas in developed countries like United States, where he is an officer of parliament, the senators request him to do audit of this area, and in British Parliament also, Parliament can ask him. But even the Public Accounts Committee cannot direct him, even though they can request him. Maybe this area you can take it during discussion. So in India, it is sole discretion of the CAG, what the Constitution has provided. But the area is too vast, but that's why even the audit is sample audit, representative audit. He cannot do 100% audit anywhere. It's not done. It's not required also. Internal audit has to do. CAG can comment on the efficiency of the internal audit, whether they are doing it or not. But CAG doesn't have to do 100% audit. It's not possible. Area also, performance audit. CAG's office, what they do is they have a big manual on performance audit, and they have a computerized system of deciding what should be taken up for audit in the performance audit system by collecting data. There are 5-6 criteria: the quantum of expenditure, the quantity of expenditure, the possibility of use or misuse in that area, or the subjectivity of the beneficiary thing, or CAG can take it into account the public interest involved in this. There are various factors are there. Taking into account all the subjects are listed out and they assign a mark and select. These are the things we should take up for audit next year. That's how the discretion goes. CAG has discretion. CAG, and there is an advisory board of CAG. In fact, I was a member at a time. It's all people from different area, from academia and profession, etc., and some retired bureaucrats. That committee meets periodically and advises CAG where he should focus audit, or where should, it's not binding, but it's recommendatory. He does. CAG also participates. So this is the method of selection of subjects. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks a lot for coming in, and please be our ambassadors. Please go out and spread the word about the colloquiums. These are happening on Fridays in afternoon, and as students, you also suggest what is the time that brings in a good amount of listeners, and we hope to carry on these conversations with you all. Thanks again for coming in, and send your suggestions. Most of you would know my email ID, but for those of you who do not know, himanshu.u@apu.edu.in. Do send suggestions about themes that you want to listen about. Do send suggestions about potential speakers and things like that, and we would be happy to receive your suggestions and comments about how was today's colloquium. And if you have any unanswered questions, you wanted to ask a question, but for the paucity of time we couldn't take up your question, please email them to me. I would.
Post it if they
Yeah.
want. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, sir.